I'm like freaking myself out here because for some reason I can't tell if I'm actually looking at the camera or not. So we'll see how this goes. What's up, witches? This video is long overdue. It's been a little over 2 years now since I began my Norse pagan path after connecting with Freya, and I've long called her my Patroness, or the main deity that I have been choosing to work with. But my video on how I came to find Freya is one of my first videos that I ever made on this channel. Since then, I've, done Freya Friday themed videos here and there, but I haven't made really any other in-depth videos on specifically what working with Freya has been like for me and what some of my personal experiences with her have been. Hi Merlin, what do you want? Since I've already made a follow-up video to working with Loki, I thought that it was high time I made a follow-up video all about working with Freya. So let's get into it. So first off, why do I call Freya my patroness and not my matron? Well, I'm really going to be diving more in depth into my own UPG or unverified personal gnosis for this video, so just to make you aware of that. But for my personal relationship with Freya, I wasn't really looking for a maternal figure or a mother figure. I'm a grown woman, I have a mother, I don't really need that type of energy or support for me personally, and I'm also just someone who is not really interested in having children myself. So to me, I don't really see Freya as much of an overtly maternal or mother goddess figure as some other goddesses, both within and without the Norse pantheon. For example, just within the Norse pantheon, if I was going to seek that type of familial, household, hearth, mother nurturing goddess energy, I would turn to Frigga. And while we know from the Eddas that supposedly Freya did have 2 daughters, Gnas and Gersemi, their names basically translate into things like treasure, precious. And so this is just my pure opinion, but it makes me wonder if, since we never really hear mention of these daughters anywhere else in the myths or the text that I've been able to find, it makes me wonder if they were just largely metaphorical for things that Freya may have brought into the world or gifts that she may have given to humankind. And I feel like, again, this is just my personal relationship and experience of her, I feel like even if she did have these children, we do know that from the stories that Freya herself was gone and traveling and wandering a lot of the time, searching for her husband, and when she was in Asgard, she was the high priestess. So she may have just kind of been more of a career woman, if you will. And like I said, just even if she was a mother, that maternal aspect was just not the main facet of her. It may be a facet of her, but I don't think it's her primary role, and for me personally, it just wasn't a role that I was looking to her to fulfill. So to me, calling her my matron just wasn't a very apt term, and I choose instead to feminize patron and call her my patroness. And it also kind of sounds like Patroness, which is cool. So the other thing that really drew me to Freya outside of her whole liking cats thing and me being a cat lady is when I started to learn more about her, I learned that she was also a goddess of magic and witchcraft. In fact, she was the one that taught Odin how to use satyr magic. And from what the little that I have researched and learned about Seder magic, among many other things, it involves the practices of prophecy, fortune telling, and divination. So those are all things that are definitely within my wheelhouse and my interests. And just as someone that wanted to not only explore the path of paganism, but also explore witchcraft and spells and things like that, it just even made more sense to establish a closer relationship with her as someone who is kind of an expert in that field, and was just another way in which having a relationship with her just really clicked with my own passions and interests, because that's definitely one thing that I really love about working with Freya, is that so many of the things that are already part of my hobbies and my passions and my interests were things that I felt kind of fell under her domain. And speaking of her domain, I wanted to get a little bit more in depth into how I see some of Freya and her Vanir deity aspects. Being a child of Njord, who is a god of the ocean and seas and the waters, we don't really see that aspect talked as much about with Freyr and Freya. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of insight into how I see their ties to water as Vanic deities, because we know that Njord is a god of the coasts and the coastal waters, and that their mother Nerthus dwells in the boggy areas and grottos further inland. And so I think that Freyr and Freya, being offshoots of those two, maybe they were the ones that traveled further inland along other waterways like rivers and streams, and that might be part of their ties to being fertility deities. We know that Freyr is a god of agriculture and crops and livestock, and I think Freya could also tie into being a fertility deity, not just in her love goddess aspect, but also being tied to water through these waterways that irrigate the crops and the fields. And we also know that as you get further to the coast, these river deltas and these delta areas, such as the Nile Delta for an example, are very rich, fertile soil that is good for growing crops. And so I see it as Njord stayed on the coast, that's his home, that's where he lives, and he sent his children, these golden twins, to travel the waterways further inland, and we can connect with them that way. And that's how they are also featured as god and goddesses of fertility and agriculture in that aspect. I also see them, the Vanir as a whole, in that sunny aspect, as really working within our solar plexus chakra or energy center, which is right below the heart chakra. As solar deities, I think of Freyr when it's kind of partly cloudy, and whereas Thor is more tied to the thunderstorms and the strong winds and rains, I see Freyr as being tied to more of the gentle rains and waters that way, that also help to nourish the crops and help things grow. And yeah, just as deities who are very friendly gods of peace and harmony, and just, yeah, that for Freyr being that solar masculine, I think that in that sunny aspect, they definitely work within our solar plexus to just help, because that is the center that deals, I think, just with overall happiness and well-being. In my videos that I did about Aesir versus Vanir and what's the difference, I definitely think that the Vanir deities are just more concerned with our overall day-to-day comfort and well-being, so that could definitely help them to impact our solar chakras in that way. Getting further into working with Freya, Really over the past year. I mean, I did my video on 1 year as a Norse pagan and some of my struggles after kind of that honeymoon phase, that initial phase of connection and just like profound spiritual experience and awakening is over. I really kind of started to feel like maybe I wasn't feeling Freya around as much anymore. That just initial sense of connection, day-to-day connection, wasn't there anymore, and I started to just really struggle with doubt. And I think this is where, as someone who wasn't really religious before starting on this path, the concept of faith really starts to come to the forefront and be very important, because once that honeymoon phase of initial discovery wears off and we're not really feeling the God's presence or just feeling them like they're around 24/7, it made me start to wonder, had Freya taken a step back? Was she not around as much anymore? Because I would see from other people's experiences where they might really connect initially with a certain deity and work with them for a long time, and then maybe that deity would move on, or they would move on, or another deity would come that they connected with more, or that wanted to connect with them more, and they would realize, oh, that initial being that I was working with, I thought that they were my like main guy, and they're not. And so for me, being someone that just gets very attached very quickly and just resonated so much with Freya, I didn't want to lose that, and I was worried that as someone with abandonment issues that I would lose her. I just really had to struggle with that. And what I found in those moments is that I just had to kind of reassure myself that not only is she still there, and she would usually always send me a sign to show me that, yes, don't worry, I'm still here, even if I'm not always around and you're physically feeling connection or feeling my presence, I'm still here and I'm still watching you, which was nice. But it also kind of made me wonder if maybe she has already taught me so much and I've done so much personal growth under her that maybe I do need her less directly in my life, because she's already taught me so much and I've already come such a long way since connecting with her and working with her. The other thing that I really wanted to touch on and talk about with you guys in terms of my own personal experiences with Freya is that I think she really works within our heart chakra, and with mine in particular is what I have found. Because I think she is not just a goddess of love, but I think she is a goddess of self-love above all. And she's really the one that pushes for you to take that time for self-care. And for me especially, as someone who has always been a people pleaser, and I talked in my video about 1 year as a Norse pagan how I was starting to get really angry and resentful over constantly falling into those people pleasing patterns. We talked a little bit recently at a gathering that I was at about how when you're in that adrenaline situation, we have that fight or flight response, but actually there is a third one, which is fawn. And I definitely found that I was a fawner. Instead of fight, flight, or freeze, I would try to people please my way out of situations and out of conflicts. And just this weird scenario of, oh, there's a bear coming to eat my face. Maybe if I just roll over and am nice enough to the people that are being mean to me, they will see that I'm a nice person, a good person, and they'll stop mistreating me or using me. And that's not the way the world works. In fact, the people will just see that you are a doormat and exploit that. So Freya really, along with self-love, has taught me a lot about self-advocacy, standing up for yourself, and setting healthy boundaries. I really see her in my Tarot of the Golden Wheel as embodying the Justice card, where she teaches us to use that sword of truth to basically cut through the bullshit and be able to discern who is actually worthy of our time and us expending our care and energy on. Because as someone who's always been a very empathetic and sympathetic person, if I see anyone who is upset or in distress or needing help, or even if I feel like they're not even asking for it, but if I feel like I need to step in and help them, I will. And I'm always like really giving of myself to the point that I always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't help others if you are constantly being drained and giving of yourself to others and never getting anything back to fill you back up. So if no one else is around to do that for you, it's even more important that you learn how to do that for yourself and take that time for yourself. The other thing that she's really taught me as someone who wants to work with those aspects of the divine feminine, and especially as someone who is in the Norse pagan faith, on its face, it can be very masculine leaning with the, what I call the brosatru of like victory or Valhalla. It's all about Vikings and Odin and that warrior culture mentality. But Viking was not a full-time job, and like you can't be all hype all the time, if that makes sense. So that is an aspect of that culture and of the religion, but there's this whole other side to it. And as someone who, like I said, is 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds soaking wet, I'm never going to be this badass, physically powerful person. But Freya also, I think, embodies the Strength card in tarot, and learning that there are different types of strength, such as, for me especially, emotional resilience is a very important one. And I think even if you are a male or male identifying, it's even more important, I think, that everyone taps into both sides of themselves and finds that balance between divine masculine, divine feminine, or active receptive types of energies, depending on what you want to call them, because it's not really a gendered thing. We all need to have a balance of both in order to be self-actualized, content beings. And so she definitely teaches me that emotional resilience is an important thing, and also that there is strength in vulnerability. It takes real courage to be vulnerable with others and bring those walls down and really share of yourself with others. I think especially in today's masculine culture, where a lot of men were grown up to repress and not acknowledge their emotions, or something that I have really noticed is a pattern where the only emotion that males are allowed to show is anger. And so even when they're feeling scared or upset or distressed, they process it all outwardly as anger. And I think it's really important that we learn, that everyone learns, that there is strength in being vulnerable and acknowledging our emotions and letting ourselves feel them. Freya, in particular with me, has really been working on breaking down those walls around the heart and around the heart chakra, because as one psychic told me, I have a lifetime of trust issues apparently. So while I am a very caring person, I've always seen myself as more of the listener or someone who's there to support others in their emotions, and I don't really share mine. I kind of keep to myself, and I'm a very introverted, private person, and I think that's maybe partly because I do have trust issues and find it hard to open up and really share deeply of myself with others. So Freya has definitely really been working with me on basically cracking those walls and breaking down those walls that I've built up around my heart, and learning to open it up and heal it back better and stronger than it was before. Like, I will often talk about how Freya likes to just really gut punch you right in the feels out of nowhere, to where one minute you're just going about your day happy-go-lucky, and then like a song comes on the radio and suddenly it just hits you right there in the chest, and you're crying in your car uncontrollably for no reason, like, Freya, why? And I think it's because she knows that we can't keep that stuff bottled up. And even I think if you're a woman in today's society, after a certain point when you reach adulthood or a certain age in childhood, everyone is taught that it's not okay to cry. But crying is a healthy release of those emotions, those negative emotions, and it can be very cathartic. And I think it's kind of a way of detoxing the body from those emotions. And the longer you bottle it up, the more detrimental to you and your well-being it can be. So I think that's why she kind of likes to really get us out of nowhere and get us right in our feels and make you cry those cathartic tears as a form of release. I think that's really where her domain and her power lies, and where my power has come to lie in working with her is that heart center of learning self-love and self-actualization above all, because as the famous RuPaul always says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And the older I get, the more true that seems, because if you don't love yourself, you won't really be able to love others, but you also won't believe you are worthy of love from others. And so even if you do get into a relationship, you might be really insecure or be constantly questioning, does this person really care about me? Maybe, like, no matter what they do to show you that or show you their love, it will never be enough for you. Or you may self-sabotage your relationships because deep down there's a part of you that doesn't believe you're worthy of that love. So it's really important that you love yourself in order to be able to accept love from others when it's being offered to you. That's really the most important thing that I wanted to discuss in this video in terms of the important work that I have done with Freya, in terms of self-love and advocacy. And that's really the only times that she will be firm with me, is when I'm in my own head too much about things and being too hard on myself, which I do very often. Like, she will be right there like, girl, stop it. In conclusion, I just wanted to reiterate again that just because you're not always feeling connected to the gods, it doesn't mean they aren't there. It's just that not every day can be one of profound spiritual and divine experiences. And I always talk about, like, with Odin, he's a very busy guy, he's a wanderer, and he has a lot on his plate, and that's why I feel like he's more aloof and not around as much. But I think the same goes for all of these very powerful beings. They can't always be right there with us when we need them, but Freya has shown me time and time again, even just through little signs and synchronicities, that even when I'm not, like, feeling her here or feeling that strong connection, they're all seeing gods. They don't exist in time and space as we know it. So even when I don't, like, actually feel her there with me, she is always very quick to send something to show me that, like, yes, I'm still here, I'm always watching over you, and I'm still here when you really need me. So that's just really nice and something that I wanted to share with you. I hope that this also helps you to see maybe some other ways and aspects in which you can work with and connect with Freya, because she has really helped me to do so much personal growth that I wish it hadn't taken me until my 30s to accomplish, but it's really great now that I'm there, and I know that I still have a lot further to go and a lot more work to do, but with Freya as my patroness, I am ready to put in that work. and she, I think, along with Odin, is one of the more accessible deities who I think is one, along with him, is the most actively recruiting amongst us and one of the more easier ones to reach out to and connect with. So I hope that you take this as your chance and your opportunity to pursue a relationship with her, because I think you'll find it very personally beneficial. And for me, even when I'm not feeling her around, I always just really try to maintain that equal exchange and maintain that line of communication by just giving little offerings when and where I see fit, just as a thank you to her for all that she's already done for me. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, delving a little bit further into my own personal UPG and experiences with Freya. And until next time, stay classy, pagans.